Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo 3 patch 2.5 season 10 monk build guide. The free season set journey that you get, the free season journey set that you get in season 10 for the monk is Ina's set, which is actually a really powerful set that's getting buffed in patch 2.5 and has endgame builds and speed farming builds associated with it. Now in the past we've covered the Ina generator build, which is an alternative to the Raiment generator build, which doesn't do as much damage but overall is easier to play, has more survivability, and only clears a few greater if levels lower than the Raiment. That build is still viable in 2.5 and in fact has been buffed. It should be able to clear 1 to 2 greater rift levels higher than it previously was, and you can go revisit that video right here. But today we're going to talk about the Exploding Palm variant of Ina's. Before the 2.5 buff, this build was able to top out at about Greater Rift 100, and with the buff we'll see maybe 101, 102 max. So it's a very powerful build, and we'll go over some speed farming variant as well. And we're going to go over all the skills and gear that you need. The build, of course, revolves around Ina's set, and we want the full 6-piece set bonus. The 2-piece bonus doubles the effect of our Mystic Ally and the base effect of our mantra. The 4-piece set gives us the effect of all 4 mantras at all times. And the 6-piece set bonus gives you the 5 runed Mystic Allies at all times and increases your damage by 125% for each Mystic Ally you have out. Now previously this bonus was just 100%, now in patch 2.5 it's been increased to 125%, which translates into 25% more damage overall, which is about 1 to 2 greater rift levels. We'll want to combine this of course with the crudest boots, which doubles the number of Mystic Allies that we'll have, so we'll have 10 in total, and this effectively doubles our damage. Now those are really the core items for any Ina build. And now we'll go over the ancillary items that we have for this particular variant. Cyclone Strike will play a big part of this build, so we'll want Lefebvre's Soliloquy Shoulders in order to give ourselves a damage reduction buff every time we do that. We'll want Bindings of the Lesser Gods, those bracers either equipped or in our cube, because those will give us a really big damage buff. Again, this combines with Cyclone Strike. These two items, Lefebvre's and Bindings, really go well together. The other bracer you'll want to use is Gungdo gear, if you're going with the Exploding Palm variant, which is really good for pushing higher greater rifts. But if you're going to go instead with Speed Rift and you're going to drop EP, Exploding Palm altogether, then you can go with Nemesis bracers or Spirit Guards if you feel you need the toughness. A cubed Fist of Astarask is going to go really well with the Exploding Palm variant of this build. But if you're going for speed runs, you can go with an Ingum. For your jewelry, a Traveler's Pledge and Compass Rose will give you a good amount of damage and survivability when pushing higher greater rifts, but if you're doing speedruns, you can actually swap that out for focus and restraint rings along with a Hellfire Amulet. Regardless, a Convention of Elements is really beneficial. You'll want this either in your cube or on your person, ideally on your person, but if you have a really bad one, then you can always go with the cube. Of course, if you're running focus and restraint, then it needs to be in the cube. And if you're solo pushing, you'll want a Unity for that added toughness. Of course, the Unity setup is 1 on yourself, 1 on your follower, and then that token that renders your follower invulnerable. This has the effect of doubling your toughness. We'll go over the exact stats you want on your gear in a bit. We'll do an overview of our skills first. We start with Way of the 100 Fists Assimilation. Now while this is a cold build, we're actually going with this physical rune here, not because we care about the damage, but because of its special effect. Each enemy hit with the 3rd hit increases your damage by 5% for 5 seconds. Overall, this is a bit of a tricky build to run. Its damage isn't consistent. It comes in big chunks based on the cooldown of a couple different things that we'll go over. So you want to be timing your Way of the 100 Fists Assimilation to build up that damage stack on enemies right before you're going to do one of those big damage chunks. We'll explain this as we go along. Next, we'll want Dashing Strike, Blinding Speed. Dashing Strike is an amazing mobility skill, and Blinding Speed is when you need that extra resistance, that extra toughness when pushing greater rifts. If you're doing easier content, speed runs for instance, you can go with Radiance instead for that attack speed buff. We're using a two-handed weapon, Ina's Reach. Your attack speed is going to be pretty slow, so having that attack speed buff will be really beneficial. If you feel you don't need the attack speed, you could go with Way of the Falling Star just for more speed. Next, we'll want Cyclone Strike, Implosion. Nxtrogen. The Implosion rune is just to increase that distance and pull in more enemies. This build really relies on building up density. Because of our Lefebvre's soliloquy and our bindings of the lesser gods, we want to be cyclone striking at least once every 5 seconds. By building up that density, that's going to give us a lot of targets to hit with our Way of the 100 Fists. And you want to make sure you spread that around, but only once you've applied the 3 hits on a single target in order to get that assimilation effect. Next we'll want Mystic Ally, and the rune doesn't matter. We're taking Mystic Ally even though we're getting the Mystic Allies for free so that we can control when we pop the active effect. This is one of our big damage chunks. Mystic Ally is on a 30-second cooldown, and you pop it for a damage boost as well as other effects. Basically, Mystic Ally is something that you want to pop once you've set up all the dominoes to deal your big damage. And we've got a couple more things to go over as well, particularly your Convention of Elements rotation. Because this is a cold build, you'll want to only pop your Mystic Ally once you enter your cold window on your Convention rotation. If you're not running the Exploding Palm variant of this build, then these are the 2 things you need to time together. You need to time your Convention rotation, that damage window, and you got to get that to overlap with your Mystic Ally active damage window. That's going to maximize your damage when both of those are happening at the same time. If you're running Exploding Palm, there will be a third thing, which we'll get to. Next, we'll want Epiphany Desert Shroud. This gives us some added toughness that we really need when we're pushing the high greater rifts. For speedruns, you can instead swap this out for Mantra of Conviction Annihilation for faster speed. Then lastly, we'll want Exploding Palm Impending Doom. So Exploding Palm Impending Doom basically plants a little bomb on an enemy. And that bomb goes off if that enemy dies, and damages everyone in an area. This combines with the Gungdo gear, which will cause a chain reaction, applying that Exploding Palm to anyone affected by the explosion. So basically, you'll get to see this really satisfying shockwave explosion of death when your Exploding Palm goes off. So this is where the third timing window comes in. When you know that your cold rotation is going to be coming up, when you know that you're going to be activating your Mystic Ally, you want to apply Exploding Palm on an enemy that's going to die really soon. The lowest health enemy that you can find. This way, once you get to your Convention of Elements cold window, once you hit your Mystic Ally, then that enemy will die and send that massive shockwave that's going to be buffed by all your damage buffs. And it's the timing of these 3 things that makes this build a little tricky. It's definitely a build that takes practice, and the gameplay you're seeing here, I don't have much experience with the build. You can see I'm struggling a bit, but it's a build that as you figure out the playstyle, as you learn to start timing all those windows, you start to see your efficiency, your damage skyrocket. It's not the easiest build to play, but when you manage to line up all those dominoes and you get those big chain reaction explosions, it's really satisfying. For our passives, we'll want Seize the Initiative. That's just a great offensive passive. We'll want Beacon of Etar. Less cooldown means more time spent using our skills. We'll want Harmony, the best monk defensive passive. And it's because of this that it's really important to get a secondary stat on every piece of gear wherever you possibly can. Then lastly, for greater rift pushing, you'll likely want to go with near-death experience. But if you're doing easier content speedruns, you can go with Unity for more damage. Also on your Hellfire, for speedruns, you can go with Fleet-footed for that much more speed. For our legendary gems, we'll want Bane of the Trapped, best gem in the game. For greater rift pushing, you'll want a Bane of the Stricken. This build is very much an area of effect build, so having a Bane of the Stricken really helps against solo target damage. Now, if you feel you need it, you could go with an Esoteric Alteration for added toughness, but the highest Greater Rift clear I saw with this build actually used a Pain Enhancer instead. Pain Enhancer applies a bleed effect, and for every bleeding area near you, you gain attack speed. Since we're combining Cyclone Strike with a lot of enemies around us that don't die for a little while until we reach our next damage window, our attack speed is going to go through the roof. Now for speedruns, or if you find it's not taking you too long to kill the Rift Guardian, you can swap out your Bane of the Stricken for an Enforcer. This buffs pet damage. If you're going with speedruns, you don't need Explosive Palm, it takes too long to apply that. You're relying entirely on your pet damage, so you can go for Breath of Heaven Zephyr for more speed. Alright, on to the stats that we want on every gear piece. The choices we present here were done by the top clear that I saw, but there certainly is wiggle room here. And a big choice is how much you want to dedicate to cooldown versus area damage. This fellow went full on with area damage, but you could squeeze in cooldown wherever you see me list area damage. So for shoulders, we want Dex, Vitality, Mystic Ally damage, and area damage. Again, you can opt for cooldown instead, and Mystic Ally damage is a little less important if we're running with the EP variation, the Exploding Palm. But even if you are going with Exploding Palm, it helps to squeeze out that much more damage. For our Helm, we want Innis Radiance, Dex, Critical Hit Chance, and then you can go with either Vitality for more toughness, or you can go with Exploding Palm damage. For our Amulet, Cold Damage, Crit Crit. For our Gloves, Dex, Crit Crit, and then either Vitality or area damage or cooldown. For our Chest, Dex, Vitality. Then the next one is kind of up to you. You can go with reduces damage from elites for more toughness, or you can go with Mystic Ally damage for more damage. For your Bracers, Cold, Dex, Vitality, Crit Chance. For your Belt, Dex, Vitality, All Resist, and Life. And the only reason we're getting All Resist on our belt is because we have no choice. For our Rings, Crit Crit, area damage. And on your Compass Rose, the additional stat could be Dex or pure damage. For our Pants, Dex, Vitality, Armor, secondary resist. For our Boots, Dex, Vitality, Exploding Palm damage, and then either move speed or armor. And on our weapon, damage, Dex, Vitality, Mystic Ally damage. For Paragon, you want to cap out your move speed at 25, then dump everything into Dex. For offense, cooldown reduction, crit chance, crit damage, attack speed. Next, we'll want all resist, life, and armor. And lastly, area damage, life on hit, resource cost reduction. Now we're going to finish off this video just by commentating the remainder of this Greater Rift. Obviously, we're at the Rift Guardian at this point, so there's not a whole lot left to do, but this fight does take me longer than it should. We're going to kind of go over mistakes that I've made, areas for improvement, and we'll start with a general note that we're up against Rhyme. So, in general, if you're a melee-oriented hero and you're up against Rhyme, you're going to have a bad time. He may not be the absolute worst Rift Guardian for melee characters, but it's definitely not the easiest. When he makes those AoEs, he really is able to control areas well, and you could try to tank it, and you could last within it for a certain amount of time, but if you want to play safe, then you're going to want to be backing out of that. And especially in the case of this build, that's particularly detrimental for the simple fact that you're going to miss, or you could be missing, your timing windows. You might have to back out of that. As you can see here, I tried to stay in a little bit longer, but ultimately I had to withdraw. I was taking too much damage. So if you miss that convention rotation because of that, you might be able to just sneak in and pop it and then sneak back out, but it just makes things more difficult overall. Also, big flaw, I was running a Bane of the Powerful instead of a Bane of the Stricken. I did not anticipate how much difficulty, how long it would take me to deal with the Rift Guardian. When the Rift Guardian is taking you this long, that's when you know, okay, I should have been using a Bane of the Stricken. It's the pretty simple kind of formula, if you will, or the rule of thumb to determine whether you should use Bane of the Powerful or Bane of the Stricken. There's a tipping point for every build. Now, as you can see here, I'm often not aligning my timing windows. I still hadn't quite figured out how to play this just right. It's one thing to have the theory, it's another thing to put it in practice. And the thing about putting things in practice is, it takes practice. So, as you can see, this is taking painfully long. What's not helping as well is the Rift layout, him backing himself into that corner there, you know, but I'm trying to get a little bit more ballsy as things are going on. This would have gone so much faster with a Bane of the Stricken, but just a little bit of health left here, and we'll finish that off. And that wraps up this guide. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Will you try out this build? Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo guides.